Elocution. Elocution. Elocution, the skill of clear and expressive speech. I consider myself to be an exceptional speaker, but it has not come with ease. In fact, when I was a child, I stuttered profusely. Some of y'all probably know that. Speech therapist said that my mind was moving faster than my mouth. I just need to slow things down up there so that my mouth can catch up down here. I hated for people to ask me what my name was because I had the most trouble with the U sound. My name is Yubi. That's okay, y'all can laugh. I got over it a long time ago. My brothers and sisters made fun of me all the time because, kids are cruel. When there's home video of us at a birthday party, and they're interviewing each kid, name and age. And there I was on tape, stinking up the place. Yubi. I was so embarrassed to speak that I only did it when I absolutely had to. I only spoke when it was absolutely necessary. But in the process of not speaking, I became very proficient in listening. Today, I consider myself to be a pretty exceptional speaker. But even more so, I consider myself to be a phenomenal listener. That's why I did so well in school. I listened. And listening is learning. The Greek philosopher Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that means we can listen twice as much as we speak." Amen? Amen. In leadership, the person in charge should never be the one doing the most talking. He or she should be the one doing the most listening, because listening is leadership. You can neither learn nor lead effectively if you're always running your mouth. I'll say that again. You can neither learn nor lead effectively if you're always running your mouth and never listening to what's being taught or the concerns of others around you who look to you for guidance. Possibly my most favorite proverb is an Arabic one. Open your mouth only if what you're going to say is more beautiful than silence. We talk a lot, and we listen a little. But it probably should be the other way around, amen? So what does any of this have to do with this morning's text? This familiar story of the Good Shepherd, this gospel narrative that highlights all of the positive attributes of the risen Savior, Jesus Christ, our shepherd, and all that is not of a good shepherd in the hired hand. Oh, and let's not forget about the wolf. Just in the first 3 verses of this gospel reading, we get a clear understanding of each. Verse 11 reads, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them." So right away we know who the good shepherd is and that he lays down his life for the sheep. We also know who the hired hand is, and that he runs away when he sees the wolf, who came to steal and scatter the sheep. But we as Jesus' flock, as the sheep to the good shepherd, what can we glean from this? The answer to this question is one of the most fascinating realities to this text, and it's in plain sight, but is rarely addressed. You see, Jesus' claims point to one key fact that permeates this message: recognition of the shepherd's voice in verse 16. And verse 16 again reads, "I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice." Of the 4 primary characters in this gospel, the good shepherd, the hired hand, the wolf, and the sheep, Jesus only attributes one characteristic to the sheep: their ability to recognize his voice, their ability to listen. Embedded in this statement is a basic fact that is recognized and studied in the field of speech communication: listening. Prior to recognizing and responding to a sound, one must first listen. In their pioneering research work entitled Listening, co-authors Woven and Coakley identify 5 basic types of listening: discriminative listening, comprehensive listening, critical listening, therapeutic listening, and appreciative listening. These interrelated types that are with the very basic ability in the individual to hear sounds and then move to the other tiers of analysis, critique, concern, and appreciation. You see, if the link between Jesus and his flock is mediated by recognition of the master's voice, what does that mean for the kind of spiritual listening involved in responding to him? In a culture and church which is heavily focused on word and speaking, the emphasis on listening as a prior condition and state can be often overlooked. Yet listening has a rich spiritual and personal biblical history in the area of spiritual formation and discernment. Listening is the prior requirement for any type of effective speaking environment. The Woven and Coakley paradigm offers some interesting possibilities for the way we hear God. And when I say hear, I say that understanding that listening is far more than merely hearing. Listening is also responding to what is heard. So what does the herd hear? Certainly the ability to recognize the shepherd's voice at all is what preaching the gospel is all about. But the attitude of listening predates the gospel. In the Hebrew scriptures, a sound preceding some invisible source was considered a heavenly voice, since the revelation on Sinai was given in that way in Deuteronomy 4:12. Ye heard the voice of the words, but saw no similitude. Only ye heard a voice. In this account, God reveals himself to man through his organs of hearing, not through those of sight. Even the prophet Ezekiel, who sees many visions, heard a voice of one that spake. And similarly, Elijah recognized God by a still, small voice. And the voice addressed him. Sometimes God's voice rang from the heights from Jerusalem and from Zion, and God's voice was heard in the thunder and in the roar of the sea. Martin Luther would later write in his small cut articles that with the effective functioning of the means of grace is mediated by the ear. In other words, without the prior attitude of listening to the Lord's voice through preaching, the sacraments, the words of forgiveness, and the church itself, our relationship to the shepherd would be rendered meaningless. We daringly claim to speak for God. Oh, especially from these pulpits on these Sunday mornings. But by our voice to bring the voice which calls us to life, salvation, new hope, and safety. It is a voice which the church has had the wisdom to recognize must be spoken repeatedly without cessation to all who recognize it and to those who are unfamiliar with it. It is that same shepherd's voice that prompts Christians to say to one another, we have heard the Lord. Jesus' statement in verse 16 prompts as much thoughtful discussion today as it did centuries past. The fact that this text is preached as part of the Easter season begs the question that if God is the risen Christ speaks even yet today, in what ways do we listen to that voice? Are we even listening to the right voice? Can you recognize Christ's voice? Okay. Discern his voice from that of the enemy or even that of your own? Well, consider this. The story of the Good Shepherd is a story about relationships. A relationship between Jesus the Son and God the Father. A relationship between Jesus the Shepherd and we the sheep. And the lack of relationship between the hired hand and the sheep. Verse 13 says, the hired hand runs away because the hired hand does not care for the sheep. You see, he didn't know the sheep and therefore did not care about their well-being. The hired hand had no deep relationship with God's flock. Relationships, my brothers and sisters in Christ, are important in the listening process. This dynamic can be seen in perhaps the most intimate relationship within humanity, the bond between mother and child. Research reveals that fetuses can hear sounds as early as 30 weeks. In particular, fetuses actively listen to the mother's voice in the final 10 weeks of pregnancy. A study was done where 60 women in the final stage of pregnancy were tested. All mothers were recorded as they read a poem out loud, and then the mothers were divided into two groups. Half the fetuses heard the recordings of their own mothers, and the other half heard another mother, but not their own. In both cases, the poem caused a change in the baby's heartbeat. The heart rate accelerated among those who heard their own mother's voice, and decelerated among those who heard a voice other than their mother. The acceleration in heartbeat rate, or the process of the heart speeding up, is a result of excitement and joy in hearing what's familiar. It's like, oh, hey, I know who that is. Or it's even like, being out somewhere and not expecting to hear your jam, your favorite song, and as soon as it comes on, it's your heart starts beating fast and you get all excited. On the other hand, the deceleration of the heart, or the slowing down of the heart rate, signifies an attention mechanism. The heartbeat among fetuses who heard an unfamiliar voice slowed down because they were paying close attention to a voice they did not recognize. In other words, they were trying to figure out who was talking because they knew it wasn't their mom. And so I challenge you this morning, saints. What do you feel in your heart when you hear the voice of God? Or what you think is the voice of God? Does your heart speed up in excitement and joy of hearing a familiar voice? Or does it slow down because the voice of God is unfamiliar and unrecognizable to your spiritual ear? If the latter is true, then you might not be in a deep enough relationship with God, and you might be following a hired hand.
Mercy.
Or even worse, a wolf. If you neither know Christ nor follow Christ, you will not know how to hear Christ's voice. So before I take my seat, I'd like to offer 3 ways to recognize God's voice from that of the hired hands and the wolves. The first way of knowing God's voice is knowing God's voice by the approach. How God speaks. You see, when God speaks, God calls and soothes us with a gentle, confident, and comforting voice of a shepherd who leads his sheep. However, like a ravening wolf, Satan seeks to drive the sheep into panic. Satan came to snatch and scatter the sheep, says the scripture. Satan threatens and demands and intimidates in the ways in which he speaks. The Lord's voice, however, is quiet and deeply internal. Satan's voice is intrusive. You see, there's a difference between internal and intrusive. I'll say that again. There's a difference between internal and intrusive. Intrusive is an uninvited guest, an uninvited voice. An internal voice is one that belongs within, one that is innate within our spirit, within our souls. The way in which God speaks offers us a way in which we can recognize God's voice from those of the hired hands and the wolves. The second way of knowing God's voice is by the content of what God says. What does God say? God always speaks in ways that concur with major principles of Scripture. That's first and foremost. God always speaks in ways that highlight his revealed attributes: kindness, love, mercy, grace. God's voice drips with mercy and grace towards us and towards others. And he does not condemn our personal growth.
Amen.
So if you ever hear a voice that's stunning your growth, that ain't God.
Mercy.
That's a hired hand. That's a wolf. You see, the Lord's voice usually focuses on changing us rather than on urging us to change others. You know, see, a lot of times we find problems in everything else and what everybody else is doing, and we wonder why we always find problems with everybody without realizing what the common denominator is in all of those relationships. Us, amen.
Okay.
Oh, but God's voice is grounded in truth and hope, in contrast to being grounded in past and negative experiences.
Amen.
The third way to know God's voice is by the effects or the impact in which God's voice has on you. You see, God's voice will have more hope rather than less hope, or at least God's voice will implant more hope in us rather than less hope when God speaks to us. Satan's voice speaks hopeless despair.
Mama.
Hearing God's voice produces more empathy for others. You know, my grandmother used to tell me it's hard to hate somebody whose story you know.
All right, all right.
Satan, on the other hand, wants us to despise or envy others. Listening to God brings a greater sense of peace, even when our outward circumstances do not change. Oh, I'll say that again. Listening to God brings a greater sense of peace, even when our outward circumstances do not change. I can bring it even closer to home. When I was 10 years old and my mother died of breast cancer, she passed away about 2 a.m. in the morning. I still remember like it was yesterday. My grandfather woke me up, he was crying, I knew why he was crying. We went to our living room. Our pastor came over at 3 a.m. that morning and he prayed for us that night. And that prayer that he prayed was the first time that I heard God's voice. Because it comforted me, even though tomorrow my mother was still going to be dead. It made me feel like everything was okay. And from that point on, I knew God was real because I heard God's voice. Amen. Listening to God brings a greater sense of peace. Even when our outward circumstances do not change. You know, years ago, a show called American Idol took the country by storm. Y'all remember American Idol? It still goes on. You said you like it. But you know, it was all about who would be the next great vocal talent. And we ate it up. We loved it. But since then, many other shows like it have emerged. The most recent and now most popular show being The Voice. You see, I like The Voice. I like The Voice because The Voice is uniquely different from the other shows in that it sheds the judges of all their biases and prejudices and prejudgments to where they are blind to the singer's appearance and must make a decision to turn their chairs around in favor of a singer based only on what they hear. You see, the singer then chooses who they'd like to build a relationship with to compete for the show's top spot. Oh, I hope y'all follow me. My brothers and sisters in Christ, we sit in those judges' chairs daily with only what we can hear and blind faith. And there are many voices to choose from. Good for nothing family members, disloyal friends, conniving co-workers, prosperity preachers, hide hands, and wolves. Oh, there are plenty of voices to choose from. But only one of those voices is the voice.
All right, all right.
Only one can be the voice of God, and the voice desires to be in a relationship with each and every one of you. So this morning, my brothers and sisters in Christ, shed yourself of the doubt, the confusion, the fear, and turn your chair around for the voice. Jesus Christ, our Savior and Lord who reigns and lives among us every day.